Welcome to the Great Coaches Podcast.
To me, being perfect is not about that scoreboard out there.
This is a chance of a lifetime.
When you can understand the person, you can then work towards a common goal.
We are all on the same team.
Know your role and do it to the best of your ability.
Focus on the fundamentals. We've gone over time and time again.
Your defense has got to be better.
Leave no doubt tonight.
Great moments are born from great opportunity.
Hello and welcome to the Great Coaches Podcast, where we believe that there is no algorithm for leadership, and so we interview great sports coaches from around the world to try and find ideas to help all of us be better leaders. Our great coach on this episode is Gail Goestenkors. Gail is a former All-American player and coach. At just 29 years of age, she was appointed as head coach of the Duke women's program and led them for 15 seasons, including 4 Final Fours and 2 national runners-up. She was the ACC Coach of the Year on 7 occasions, and on 3 occasions led the team to undefeated regular seasons. She has also led the University of Texas and has been a coach on the USA women's team. Her teams have gone on to win 5 ACC tournament championships and 8 ACC regular season titles. Gail also holds the ACC record for fewest games required to achieve 300 wins as a coach. In 2007, she was the Associated Press National Coach of the Year. And just before we go to the interview, today's podcast is brought to you by the Macquarie University Business School's MBA program. Designed to empower, challenge and transform, the Macquarie MBA gives you the business skills and knowledge you need to succeed in an evolving global economy. The program bridges the gap between theory and real-world application, bringing together world-leading professors, executives and industry partners to teach you how business can be used for good. I have just started working with the team at Macquarie on some projects and can attest to the quality of the people and material. To find out more, search for Macquarie University Business School's MBA. And now, please enjoy our interview with Gail Goestenkors.
You're listening to the Great Coaches Podcast.
Good morning, Gail Goestenkors, and welcome to the Great Coaches Podcast.
Good morning. I'm so happy to be on the air with you.
Thank you for joining us. I have to ask, though, could we begin by you just telling us where are you in the world and what have you been up to so far today?
Well, I am actually in the great state of Michigan in the United States. That's where my family is from. And after traveling really around the world and certainly around the United States for most of my career, I decided to come back closer to home to be closer to my family and my parents. And I consult, and I'm consulting for the University of Kentucky. And so I can consult from anywhere. So it's just been a joy to be closer to my family and still be able to help others on their journey.
Well, I know exactly how that feels, Gail, after coming home too, to be closer to my family. So well done on that decision. I think your family are probably very happy as well. But Gail, can I start by just names checking some of the great coaches you've had experience with? In preparing for today, I can see Marsha Reel, Lynn Dunn, Van Chancellor, and Anne Donovan. It's a pretty good group of coaches to have had experience with. But having watched these people up close, what is it you think the great ones do differently that sets them apart?
Well, I think what I really learned is that there are so many different ways to be successful. You know, they don't all do the same thing. Marsha Reel, she was my college coach, and she said, we're just going to run and play. I mean, we really didn't have set plays. We were just pressing 94 feet the entire game. That was just the way, but that was her personality type. And then Lynn Dunn, excellent with X's and O's. In her goal, we were going to out execute everybody. I mean, she wanted control And she was just a mastermind with the game of basketball. Van Chancellor, he was a let it play kind of guy. So working with him in the Olympics and the World Championships, he just played in practice. I mean, we didn't run a lot of drills. We played cutthroat. It was 3-on-3 all out, no out of bounds play. He wanted always to just bring out their competitive juices. Because he had the best players in the world. So, and then Ann Donovan was a little bit of all of it. She of all of them had played at the very highest level. You know, she had been an Olympian where the others weren't. So I feel like she was a little bit more of a player's coach. She wanted to know, how did they feel? What did they think? She wanted them in on the process. So I was so fortunate to learn different styles of play, different ways of motivating from each of these coaches, and all of them in their own right were successful at the highest levels.
Not only have you worked with some great coaches, but you've coached against a couple of other good ones too. I can see that you've coached against Gino Auriemma and Pat Summitt. From all of these experiences, Gail, put all of it together, what have you learned about creating team identity?
Yeah, I think that you have to be who you are. And I think when I think of all those coaches, and specifically when I think of Pat and Gino, their players played to the identity of their head coaches. You know, Pat's teams were always going to be, they were going to come at you. They were going to be so physical. They were going to usually lead the nation in rebounding. You know, she was just such a strong-willed, tough individual. Gino's teams were almost always going to try to out-execute you. Their offensive schemes, their offensive system, his attention to detail, second to none. So they were different, but their teams, you can see their teams, their personality come out through their team. So I guess the biggest thing that I've learned through all this was, and I learned it when I first became a head, you have to coach to your identity, to your personality. When I had worked for Lynn for 6 years at Purdue, and then I finally got my first head coaching job at Duke University, I tried to be Lynn Dunn. You know, she was my greatest mentor. And so I was trying to be her for maybe my first 2 years before I realized I can't do this. It's not working. She has a distinct style of play. She had a distinct personality, and I didn't have that personality. And so I had to learn to be comfortable in my own skin and figure out what is going to work best for me. Because then when you get into your comfort zone, you're a much better coach. You're more authentic, and the players respond to that.
You've had some great mentors. I mean, you talked about Lynn Dunn there, and I've heard you talk about her in other interviews as well. And I know that you now are quite an active mentor for other young coaches. What do you think, Gail, are the key ingredients of a good mentor-mentee relationship?
Yeah, I love mentoring young coaches now. That's what I love to do. So I've done this for the last several years, and I specifically love working with coaches where it's their first time in that head coaching seat, because they're going through so many things. And I made so many mistakes along the way. So anytime I can keep them from making some of those mistakes, I feel good. And I think some of the most important things that we've tried to focus on, number one, is going to be trust, because you've got to trust one another. You've got to trust that the mentor has your best interest at heart, that they're going to have your back and be by your side, and that they're going to tell you hard truths. So I think that's the biggest thing has been, number one, we have to establish our trust. And then number two is the communication, because not only do I have to tell them the truth, but they have to be able to hear the truth. And sometimes what you have to hear isn't something you necessarily want to hear, but it's something that if you know somebody's got your best interest, it's like your best friend telling you something nobody else will tell you, or your brother, your sister, whatever it is, telling them. And in a way, that's the other thing, it's communicating in a way that they can hear what you're trying to say, so it's always important how you get that message across. And sometimes, especially when we're working with some new clients, it takes some time to establish. You have to establish that trust. And then for me, I always have to try to find my way. How can this person best receive the information that I need to tell them? There's a time, there's a place. We have to find that sacred space where they can hear what they need to hear to be the best coach they can possibly be.
Have you had some experiences along the way that have not been good and have helped maybe alter or sharpen your work as a mentor?
Many over all of my years. Yes, I'm sure I've done some great things. I know I have, but I've also, any coach, if they're willing to really look themselves in the mirror, is going to know they've made tons of mistakes, lots of mistakes. So I think it's been very helpful with some of the people that I worked with, that I tell them, here's what I did wrong. So you might want to try something a little bit different. Or I constantly bring up things that were mistakes that I made. And fortunately for me, the time that I was making those mistakes, everything wasn't always out on social media yet. So I made the mistakes in the privacy of my own gym most times, not always, but most times. So it was just my players and my staff, as opposed to, things weren't on national TV as often as they are now. And everybody didn't have a cell phone in their hand and posting it. So my goal is to help them not make the same mistakes that I made.
Well, to that end, Gail, you say, and this is a quote, develop a mission statement, who you are and what you stand for, and then always go back to that mission statement, because sometimes we get lost along the way. And I was wondering, Gail, if you could tell us about your mission statement when you were a coach, or perhaps even one that you helped another coach develop.
Yeah, I think, and one thing I will say is my mission statement through the years grew and changed, as I grew and changed. So I think you need to reevaluate too every year. Is this still what I believe? Is this at the core of what my heart speaks to? And so constantly reevaluating your mission statement and what you stand for. And I'm just going to read you. This was the last mission statement. I had to look it up because it's been a while. What my last mission statement was, it was cultivating environments of sustained excellence on the court, classroom, and community, and empowering women to become independent, confident, and successful leaders. So that was my last mission statement. And as you can see, it had nothing to do with wins or losses. I always felt like if you developed the whole person and you cared about, and they knew you cared about the whole person, the wins and losses would take care of themselves.
Was there a moment or event that triggered the first mission statement that you wrote for yourself?
Yes. As a matter of fact, it was because Lynn, I never knew that Lynn had mission statements. If she did, I still don't know if she did or didn't, but it was my first year at Duke. So I went to Duke, like I said, for 6 years with Lynn, and we had won the Big Ten championship, and we were continually in the NCAA tournament. Well, when I went to Duke, we were picked to finish last in our conference. And we did finish last in our conference. And I'll never forget being halfway through the conference season, the ACC, and we had lost every single game, and badly, not even close. And I remember coming back on the bus and saying to my assistant, like, where is the patsy in the league? Where's the team that we know we can beat? We need that team. We got to get a win. We need that team. And my assistant said, we are that team. We are the team that everybody knows they can beat. There is nobody else. It's us. And it was like, I'd never been on a losing team before. So I didn't know how to deal with that. I'd never experienced that. So I went to the back of the bus and I just talked to my team and I said, y'all, we have to forget about the scoreboard. It had become so important to me. I said, we've got to just forget about the scoreboard. I said, if you play harder and smarter than your opponent, then we're going to be winners in my book. So I'm taking the scoreboard, the pressure of the scoreboard off of you. Let's just focus on two things we can control, and only two: play harder and play smarter. And so that was my first real, it's short and sweet, but it was my first really mission statement. We will play harder and we will play smarter. And then I went back and told my staff, and we will recruit more talented players so that we could use, but those were always the building blocks. And I told my team, and from then on, that was always those were the building blocks of who we would become, just with those two things.
Well, you were appointed as a head coach at the age of 29, which is very, very young, especially in an American sense. But when you got to Duke, there was a coach a couple of courts over, Coach K, perhaps one of the best there has ever been, or at least that's the way other people talk about him. And I'm just wondering, did he help you or influence your approach in any way, especially given your age?
Most definitely. And I would say, I think I got the job, first of all, because I'll never forget Tom Butters. He was the athletic director who hired me. He said, well, I couldn't pronounce Coach K's last name, and I certainly can't pronounce your last name, so it must be a good sign. So I think I got the job just because I had a name that he could not pronounce. But Mike, we had to share one court. So we didn't have, now everybody's got practice courts and all this. We had Cameron Indoor Stadium, which was a mighty fine court to share, but it was one court for us, men's basketball and volleyball. We all three shared the same court. So I would say first and foremost, again, it goes back, communication was essential because he liked to have 2 practices a day, and we had to get in, and, you're working with schedules, class schedules. So I learned the art of communication really from Mike, because I think he's one of the greatest communicators of all time. The other thing I learned from him is he has tremendous vision. Like before his first day of practice even starts, he's seeing the outcome. He sees big picture. And not only does he see the big picture, but the way he articulates his vision to others, whether it's his team, a community, it doesn't matter. The way he articulates his vision is magical. It's just so impressive. And because of that, I also think he's one of the greatest motivators of all time, because he can get you, he'd speak to my recruits sometimes. I'd ask him if he'd just say a few words to my recruits, and they'd want to come play for him because he was so articulate at expressing his love for the university and for basketball. And he just makes you feel like you're the most special person in the world while he's talking to you. So I learned a great deal from him about being very present and with the person that you're speaking with, and also the ability to paint a picture for people so that they can not just see your picture, but feel it.
Oh, terrific. I met him, Gail, many, many years ago. I met him in China. I didn't know who he was. I was standing at the back of the room and I just got chatting to him, and I know exactly what you meant. He was chatting to me as if I was, the most important person in the room, and yet I didn't know who he was. So there you go.
Now you do.
Now I do. Now, I wanted to ask you, in basketball, the coach is actively involved. They're almost like the sixth player in their ability to call plays and just involve themselves in the game. Of course, they're quite close to the players. But I wanted to ask you what you've learned about balancing this involvement with the need to sort of step back and empower people that are on the court, and also empower the staff that are sitting beside you.
Yeah, I think, again, the way I started, I was a control freak. And that happens sometimes when people go from being longtime assistants to head coaches. You're used to the head coach telling you to do things, and then you try to figure everything out. Well, when you become a head coach, when you're in that CEO chair, you have to learn to delegate because you don't have enough time to do it all. So I would say, one, I started off wanting to control everything, every call, every play, scouting reports. I was helping doing scouting reports because I just wanted to have my hand in everything. And then slowly but surely, I learned that I need to empower other people. I needed to empower my players. I needed to empower my staff. And my goal became, I want my staff to be really well prepared because Lynn Dunn prepared me really well. She put me in charge of everything during some point in time at Purdue University. So I needed to start doing that with my staff as well. So I let go of the reins a little bit, empowered my staff, empowered my players. And some of the ways I empowered my players, I started asking them questions. What do you think about this play? What do you think would work for us? How do you feel in these situations? I would put them in charge, sometimes of drills. I'd say, especially to my seniors or leaders that I was trying to develop, I'd say, okay, you're in charge of this drill. Go ahead and teach it to the underclassmen. I'd have them teach the drills. I'd have them, sometimes we'd work on out of bounds plays. If I saw a new out of bounds play, I'd like, hey, y'all, let's see if we think this will work. So I wasn't telling them it would work. I'd say, what do you guys think? Let's see. And then I'd let them name the out of bounds play so that they felt some ownership to what was going on. So I would say early, I tried to control everything. And then as I grew as a coach, I understood people played better and they played harder and they worked harder for you when they felt so invested in the program and that they had a say in what was going on. So I also, one thing that I think was very beneficial, my players loved it, is I had the players do scouting reports with a coach. So every single game that we played, a player would do the personnel of our opponent. So they knew, the players would stand up in front of the team and they would help give the scouting report. And what it did, it helped them learn the game better because we were watching film of an opponent. We weren't, normally it's human nature when you watch film of yourself, you're watching yourself. But when you watch a team and you're not on the court, you can start to see plays and you can start to see tendencies. So it helped our players become better, understand the game of basketball better. It put them in leadership situations, but it also made them so invested. If they said somebody was a 3-point shooter and during the game, that player got a 3-point shot off, our players were now coaching each other, saying, I told you she was a 3-point shooter. So it helped them really, I think, understand the game and become very vested in what was happening during the game. And it also gave the one-on-one time that we needed between players and coaches while they were working on their scouting report together. So for a variety of reasons, it really helped empower the players.
Gail, another one of your sayings was talk is cheap, actions speak. But sometimes as a leader, our actions fall short of what we aspire to. And I'm wondering, is there an example you can share with us when this might have happened to you and how you dealt with it?
Oh, gosh, it happened to me so many times. I fell short on many occasions. But I will say I always was, as soon as I realized the error of my ways, I would turn around and apologize in front of the team because I wanted to model the behavior that I wanted them to have as well. So I will say I was always very quick to turn right back around and say, y'all, I messed up here. It might be, I know there's times when I've yelled at a player and it wasn't called for. I shouldn't have done that. It was the heat of the moment, but there's no excuse. I made a mistake. Or if I would, let's say, jump to a conclusion. I thought somebody was out drinking last night when, the night before a game or something, and they shouldn't have been. But instead of getting all the facts, I jumped to a conclusion that they had done something wrong. So I know that had happened in the past where I just made an assumption that was incorrect instead of getting all the facts first. So the greatest gift I can say, because we're all going to make mistakes, and that's the way you handle it. You handle it the way you want your players to handle it, and that's to just ask for forgiveness, admit you made a mistake, and let's move on.
I have another good quote from you, Gail, and you say, if you ask good questions, if you keep your mouth shut, you'll find out a great deal about what's in someone's heart, mind, and soul. There's a lot in that quote. There's listening, there's asking good questions, and then there's actually going beyond just what's in someone's consciousness, but going much deeper. But the question I wanted to ask was probably the simplest one, which is, what tips do you have on just formulating those questions?
Yeah, I think I was a psychology minor, so that's my mind is always trying to go a little bit deeper and really develop those relationships and find out. I don't think you can properly motivate someone if you don't know what's in their heart, because everybody's motivated differently. Everybody has gone through different life experiences. So I think the most important thing is trying to figure out, how can I touch this person's heart? How can I get them to open up to me? And that, again, all comes from trust. So how can I get them to trust me? So a lot of times I'll take them, let's just go shoot around. Let me just rebound for you. Because their comfort zone as basketball players, their comfort zone is the gym. And so that was always my sanctuary, and it is for many players. So let's just go into your sanctuary, which is the gym, and let me just throw you the ball and you just shoot. And then we just start talking about, how was your day today? And then you get, it's peeling away that onion, layer by layer. How was your day? How are your folks doing? What have you been thinking about? What are your fears? What are your hopes? What are your dreams? And sooner or later you can plan out the first couple of questions to get to, but then the conversation usually takes on a life of its own. And most times it goes somewhere I wasn't even anticipating, but those were always probably my favorite times, were my one-on-one conversations with my players, finding out who they were and what made them tick and become the person they are, and what were their hopes and dreams, and how could I help them get there.
You also had an interesting ritual you used with journals and first-year players. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, the journals, and actually I had all of my players use the journals, but I gave every freshman a journal when they came to school, and I would have various questions in the journal for them. So the very first question was always, it was more of a statement. It was, I am ... And then they had to fill out how they saw that. It helped me learn a lot about them just with that one question. I am ... Who do they think they are right now? Do they think they're just a basketball player? Do they think they're a spirit, incarnate in this world? Do they think they're just a daughter or a son or black or white? Like, how do they describe themselves? So that was always the very first question. And then the next page would be different questions like, what is my greatest fear on the court? What is my greatest fear off the court? What is my ambition? Where do I see myself in 5 years, in 10 years? What is the one thing I want to work on to be a better person? What is the one thing I want to work on to be better on the court? So I took things on the court, which was easier for them, but I was also interspersing things off of the court that were more emotional for them. If there's one thing I could change about myself physically, what would it be? So all of these things. And then as sophomores, juniors, and seniors, sometimes I'd ask them the same question again to see if it had changed. The I am ... by the time they were seniors usually did change. So, and then by the time it was, and they kept these journals all year long, and periodically throughout the season, I'd just ask a different question and they'd have to write it down. And then when they were seniors, when they graduated, then I gave the journal back to them and it was full. So I figured 10 or 20 years from now, they're going to look back and really be able to see introspectively what they went through during their college experience.
So those journals, they would fill them in, Gail, and then they would share the story with you one-on-one, or they'd hand you the journal. How would it work?
Yeah, they'd give me back the journal, and then we'd have a one-on-one meeting about it, because I wanted to read what they wrote first, and then we'd sit down, and then I could say, tell me about this. Tell me more about this. Why do you feel this way? So it's just another way to have those one-on-one kind of deep conversations to find out what's at their core. And then I'd give them back when I had another question for them. But I kept them safe so that nobody else because it was I didn't want other people to see their personal thoughts if they didn't want to share.
No, it's a very intimate ritual, and I'm sure you would have uncovered. I mean, 18, you're moving out of home sometimes for the first time. I imagine what they were sharing with you was quite intimate. It was quite deep. It's
quite a gift.
Yeah, it's a great way of building a connection with someone. But I'd like to talk about you, if we could, for a minute, because I've got a quote here, and it comes from your time in Texas. You say, "I expect greatness from us. Nobody can put more pressure on me than I put on myself." And I know that time in your career was a difficult period, but what I wanted to explore was this whole idea of putting pressure on yourself and what you've learned about handling this pressure as your career has matured.
Yeah, I think if there's one thing I could take away, it was the pressure that I constantly put on myself to be successful. And I always felt like I was letting my team down if we didn't win. I just felt that pressure. And now I see more that that's very egotistical. You don't think it is, but really when you think you have that much control, that's ego. So, but for the longest time, if we lost, especially at the end of the year in the NCAA tournament at a Final Four, I would feel like somebody had died, like it was just, and I always felt like it was my fault. And so that's a hard way to live. So when I was at Texas and people were worried about the media wants you to be more successful and go to Final Four, I'm like, I'm not worried about that because I know I already do that to myself. And it is a very hard way to live. So it was interesting. I think when I got better as I grew older and more mature, but I also know when I left Texas and retired from basketball for a while, and I was working for ESPN, I was an analyst for ESPN for 4 years. I called maybe 30 games a year. So I was at 60 practices. The game, you go to the practice to kind of do your prep work and talk to the coaches. So I was about maybe 60 practices a year, seeing all of these different coaches dealing with stress. And I just wanted to tell them, this is not life or death, because some of them would be so stressed out and they'd be screaming at their players and angry. And I was like, oh gosh, I could feel it. And I just felt bad for them and bad for some of the time I wasted probably being exactly the same way, where I wasn't enjoying myself. I was just putting that much pressure on myself to win, not realizing that it is just, at the end of the day, it's a game, and there are kids that are playing the game and they're doing their very best. Even when you don't think they are, they are.
When it came to debriefing a game, I've heard some people call it dumping the game, processing it and moving on so that you can get focused and not let it linger during the week. Did you have any routines that you found worked better than others?
Yes, I always watched the game before I went to bed. So when the game was over, whether we were on a bus, a plane, or it was a home game, I could not sleep if I did not watch the game. So immediately, as soon as I could, I was going to watch the game over. And what I found was the game was never as bad as I thought it was, and it was never as good as I thought it was. So if I thought we played a great game, life is good, when I watched it, it would always temper me. It would balance me into understanding, well, no, we made mistakes here. Here's where we can improve, and vice versa. When I think we're just awful, I'd go, you know what? We actually did some really good things here. We need to build on those things. The other thing I did, so I always broke the tape down. I needed to do that for myself to be able to sleep. And then the next morning I had somebody would put it together for me, all the clips that I wanted. And I always put it into 2 categories. So the team always knew we were going to watch tape the next day of the game. And the tapes were plays for improvement. I always started with that, plays for improvement, and then plays of excellence. So I always made sure they were balanced, even if the game wasn't balanced, even if I had to search high and low for the goods, I was always going to have a balance of plays for improvement and plays of excellence. And we were going to walk onto that court with the plays of excellence. Always was the last thing they saw, because I wanted them going back into the gym feeling, okay, here's what we're going to work on, and here's what we did really well. I wanted them to feel good going back onto that court.
Can imagine.
And I wanted to feel good.
Can imagine you could too. Gail, in 2006, you were given the honour of being named the USA Basketball Coach of the Year. Now, I know this might sound like a strange question, but I was wondering, was that award easy to accept?
No. No individual awards have ever been easy to accept for me. It's a team sport. That's why I got into basketball. I ran track as well in college. I was pretty good at it, but I did not like the fact that you could win and your team could lose. It just didn't feel right to me. So basketball's always been, the team aspect of basketball has always been what I love most about it. So whenever there's an individual award, it just goes against everything I feel and believe. So yeah, it was very uncomfortable for me. I'm also by nature an introvert. So stuff that pushes me out in front of people it's not the most comfortable for me.
Well, I'll pick up on this introvert thing if I can, because when you left Texas, you talked about needing to re-energize. Now, when you talk to other leaders today about managing their energy, what kind of things do you tell them?
Number one is balance. I think you can get so consumed with what you're doing with the sport, especially now with recruiting, and you've got to go out and raise money now for the NIL. I mean, but you have got to take time to nourish your soul. And so I didn't do that. I was so all consumed with the game of basketball, with my team, with recruiting. I also was, there was a period in there, I think of 8 years, where we went to 4 Final Fours, but all those 8 years in the summer, I was recruiting, but I was also working USA basketball. So I don't know that I took a day off for maybe 8 years. It just didn't happen. So I'm very protective, I guess, almost to the coaches that I work with having them I have them journal, but I also have them always plan ahead. When are you taking these days off? Because if you don't put it in your calendar at the beginning of the year, during the summer, if you don't put it in your calendar, it's not going to happen, because there's always going to be a recruit or a player or a tape you got to watch. There's always going to be something that's going to keep you from really taking care of yourself. And even like last year with the coach I'm working with right now at Kentucky, I asked her, because she was I said, what do you do to fill yourself up, to fill your cup? And she said, well, I love to work out. And I said, we had talked about journaling, but are you journaling? She said, no. I said, well, have you been working out? No, I haven't had time. I said, all right, let's get your calendar out and put your workout first thing in the morning, or whenever you want to do it. But first thing in the morning was good for her. And then right behind it, after you shower, let's write in your journal. So just trying to get her, because it can be just so all consuming, and then you get burned out.
Gail, if I could take you back now and introduce you to that junior who was coaching the 7th grade girls at St. Stephen's, what would you say to her?
I'd say it's going to be a roller coaster and enjoy the ride. There's ups and downs. No matter what, there's going to be ups and downs. So just put your hands up sometimes and enjoy the ride.
Well, from enjoying the ride, I would like to finish with just one final question. I know that you haven't actually come out and said your head coaching days are over, but you seem to have moved on and moved into another stage of your career where you're helping other leaders. But now that you're in this stage and you've got some time to reflect, Gail, what is it you hope is the legacy that you've left behind you as a leader?
I would say that I cared deeply about my players and really my staff, everybody that I've worked with, that they know that I've cared deeply about them. and that I've helped them grow physically as a basketball player, but more importantly, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, just that I led with love and with integrity.
I think, love and integrity are a pretty good place for us to finish. So, Gail Goestenkors, thank you so much for your time today. I've loved researching and learning a little bit about you and hearing your story. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Hi everyone, you have been listening to the great coach, Gail Goestenkors. I hope you got a lot out of Gail's long and varied career and found a few ideas, particularly around the way to rise up from disappointment, that you can bring back to your own dinner table, locker room or work table for discussion. When I listened back, some of the key highlights for me were her belief that you can't properly motivate someone if you don't know what is in their heart. How she enjoys mentoring young head coaches, and when she starts a mentoring relationship, she focuses on firstly establishing trust, then aligning on ways they can communicate so that the mentee receives the information. And learning to stand back as a head coach and not try and control everything because you simply do not have enough time. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. And just before we go, if you have any feedback, then please let us know. Just like Matt Asquith, who after listening to our Thriving Teams episode said, really enjoyed this episode. Thanks, Matt. We love the interaction with the people around the world who listen. So if you have any feedback or comments, please let us know. And if they're positive ones, well, don't be afraid to share them on social media too. All the details on how to connect with us are in the show notes or on our website, thegreatcoachespodcast.com.